Hello, fellas. Welcome back to Fallacious Truth. This is going to be part 4 in our 3-part story series. Part 4, we're going to compare and analyze the last 3 parts of the story here to see what happened, some of the red flags, some of the signs, what he could have done differently, and then we're going to break off and do something different here. Instead of going along with the story, I mean, this man was extremely fortunate with how things turned out for him. But we're going to modify the story a little bit. We're going to change it so she isn't as accommodating. And what we're going to do is move forward with this as to how most divorces go, which is usually a metaphorical bloody battle till the end. This was originally only going to be a single video analysis, but once I started doing this, I realized it needed to be much more time. I'm already up to about 25 to 30 minutes now. And quite honestly, it could be much longer if I wanted it to. So I've split this off into 2 videos, part A and part B of the analysis. What you're hearing now is going to be part A. I'm going to quickly put up here links to the last 3 videos if you haven't listened to it thus far. If you want to go back and listen to them, it will make this particular video make a lot more sense. And it won't make it seem like I'm simply pulling this out of thin air, so to speak. But this previous story, it sets the stage for an extremely good compare and contrast and leaves gaps open so we can insert what should be done where it should be done in a normal divorce if, like I said, normally the woman isn't this accommodating. Normally, there is a huge battle for everything. So sit back, stay tuned, and hopefully you can glean some knowledge and experience out of this. And you know what? Jot some notes down because, like I said, this is excellent information that you're probably not going to get or find anywhere else. It took about 6 months, but she appeared to be coming out of her funk and seemed to be getting back to her normal self. We were both doing well with the kids. She seemed to have her personality back, and we were talking about the future. She also started exercising to get back in shape. She really did look incredible. What we're going to find out here is that, of all things, she became a waitress and a bartender. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, that's just the way things happen, you would be sorely mistaken. Later on in the story, in the 3rd video specifically, we discover that this was a place that she frequented. They frequented. She knew the people there. She knew the environment. She knew what she would be exposed to and what she would be seeing. Now, I'm sorry, women may disagree with me on this, but a bartender atmosphere is not the proper environment for a married woman, especially with children. Yes, I'll say this as a disclaimer. There may be a handful of those women out there who can do it, but the vast majority can't, especially with the constant, insatiable need for some kind of validation and attention. He goes on to say that she has a degree in business, but didn't want a white-collar job. This goes to show us unequivocally that they don't need the money, that she has the ability to get a higher-paying job, but she chose not to. What this does show us is that she wanted to be able to socialize and mingle with different people her own age, validating what she said earlier. She was putting herself back on the market, and her husband was naive enough to believe that it was for no other purpose than to, and I quote, get her out of her funk. He goes on to state that she also thinks that the hours would be too much responsibility in a white-collar job. Well, as far as hours go, how many white-collar job businesses let out at 2 to 3 a.m.? As a bartender, this would have been expected of her as far as a shift goes. Maybe not every shift, but certainly some shifts. Anyhow, back to the story here. And I enjoyed giving her compliments and telling her how much I loved her. During this time, she also talked to me about getting a part-time job. It was not so much about money, but more of a way for her to get out of the house and stay involved. I told her it was a great idea and encouraged her to think about what she wanted to do and then go for it. To my surprise, she got a job as a waitress and a... oh my gosh. To my surprise, she got a job as a waitress and a bartender at a restaurant right down the street from us. Red flag number 1 here, folks. She has a degree in business, but didn't want a white-collar job. I wonder why. She thought that the hours and responsibilities would be too much for our home and our family, but this would get her up and moving. She would be able to earn some money for herself and feel like she was contributing. Plus, she said that she needed to work and talk with adults, and she felt this would get her out of isolation at home. Once again, I told her that it was great news and she should go for it. Yeah, your wife working as a bartender. I'm not so sure about that. That can potentially lead to all kinds of problems. You know, it's one thing to want to socialize with people to get out of your funk, as it's stated here, but you don't do it by being a bartender. especially after you've just intentionally got back in shape. Now you want to be a bartender. Kind of starting to put two and two together. I'm surprised he didn't see this. So, in the first part of the story here, specifically in the first video, they have just had a tragic miscarriage. Apparently, they were both depressed for quite some time because of it. Once they hit the 6-month mark, she starts to want to work. Now, while it doesn't specifically say she worked prior in the story, one can infer that she didn't. One can infer that she was and has been home for quite some time. Now, while this may not be a red flag for some, it might be for others, especially if it's something completely out of her normal routine. If it's not something she typically does. And from the sounds of it, it isn't. At this point, she's starting to separate herself in preparation for her new self, as we'll find out later on in the story. It sounds as though she actually blames him, her husband, for her depression and having this miscarriage. And now her first thoughts are to change her image for a new change. While it's completely normal to compliment your wife, from what I can see here, she took it as in now, he's giving me compliments and validation again. And it's now time for me to put myself back on the market and see what I can reel in because I'm unhappy. I mean, this is red flag number 2 here. She starts to talk about wanting to get a part-time job now when she didn't have one before. Now, while there's nothing wrong with getting a job, especially if you need or want to make some extra money, we found out that this wasn't the case at all. They don't need the extra money. She did it so she could get out, and I quote, to talk with adults and be with adults her own age. Well, if this is the only intent, why not become a part of some parent activities for mothers? Why not do something that benefits your family, your children? Instead, it's all about her and her wanting to get out. Now, I noted earlier that my wife is an attractive woman. I should also add that she's a voluptuous woman and was looking really great with her level of fitness and weight loss. She has never had a problem attracting the interest from men, but she has always been loyal to me, and I never had any reason to doubt her. Well, it's either that or she put on a great facade and you simply never knew. She started her job and was doing well. She worked 2 to 3 nights per week and usually worked on Friday or Saturday. I was somewhat uncomfortable with her work outfits because she wore clothing that accentuated her figure. Now, that's understandable. I'd be uncomfortable with that too, anyone would. It was tasteful, but I admit that I wish she would be more conservative with the way she dressed. She laughed at me on this and said that it was a great way to bring in more tips, and perhaps her outfits would spur more romantic interest on my part. Well, I mean, right there, she just told us that she wants to get noticed, she wants more validation from other people, and she's currently unhappy with their married relationship. Okay, so now we need to start to put things together. We need to start putting things in the proper perspective. She has the validation for her husband while getting better and back in shape. She's also used to getting the attention of other men. She doesn't want a higher paying job. She wants to be a bartender of all things. That's what she goes for, and apparently that's what she's able to get, and fairly quickly too, I might add, with very little effort. She also works on the busiest times of the week as well, Friday nights and Saturday nights. She's also intentionally wearing clothing that is form-fitting and revealing, and according to her, it's for the purposes of getting tips and more money. While it's one thing to do this when you're a younger woman who is single, it's an entirely different thing altogether to do it when you're married. In fact, I would go as far as to say that it's completely out of line to do it when you're married. You are obviously not doing this for your husband. You're not doing this for yourself. You're doing this to garner more attention, more validation, and you're doing this to get noticed. I'm sorry, but that's completely inappropriate behavior for a married woman, especially with children. She also goes on to say that she's wearing these outfits to spur more romantic time with her husband. Well, that's a red flag right there. That tells you in her own words that she's unhappy with the romance currently in the marriage. She's seeking attention from somewhere else. To her, all of this is emotional. She wants the attention, she wants the validation, she wants to be seen, and she doesn't care who she hurts in the process, as this simply points to the entitled mentality of modern women. The owner of the restaurant was a good man and ran a good business. He was fair with his workers, and his family also all worked there. His son, to be honest, was somewhat of an arrogant jerk. He had been born into wealth and made no bones about living a nice lifestyle. He was about the same age as my wife, and I must admit, he was a very good-looking guy. He was married, but he had no children yet. His wife is a lovely and wonderful person as well. She also worked at the restaurant and handled the books. The son handled all of the catering and special events. At least that's what he was supposed to do. My understanding is that he was somewhat lazy and constantly dumped his responsibilities off on his family and co-workers. What he liked to do was lift weights, work out, drive around in his fancy car, live off of his family, and basically talk and brag about how great he was with women. I'm not sure how his wife dealt with all this. He was admittedly a flashy guy, but the guy did not impress me in the least. I could tell from the first time I met him that he was not much more than a big mouth windbag. My wife several times had commented to me that he was a good looking guy in an exciting way, but he was also an arrogant toe rag, whatever that is. And she could not stand him, but she had to work with him and keep her mouth shut to get along. She did work with him on a constant basis, and they then began to have some type of a friendship forming. I wasn't overly concerned, but did tell her that this guy was trouble and she should be careful around him. During the next several months, my wife did begin to act peculiar. She kept a very close eye on her phone, claimed that she had to work late. She began to be absent for long periods of time and claiming she was shopping or running errands. She also began to ignore me to some extent, and I also thought she was not as attentive to the kids as she had been in the past. Now, with all this that he's seeing, with all the red flags that we're all seeing right now, the moment he started seeing these, the moment he started noticing that things weren't normal, things that go against the daily grind, drop what you're doing. You need to go out and get yourself a recorder. You need to get yourself a physical notebook and some pens. You need to start documenting everything. What's also important is that you date everything. Everything must be dated and everything must be time-stamped as much as humanly possible, down to the minute if you can. The more detail you have, the better it is. It leads to better credibility for you if it's ever needed in the future. And because everything here is a he said, she said thing, you, as a man, will need as much credibility and documentation as you possibly can get. She won't. She will be believed. You will not. You need to take pictures, take photos, anything that you can to corroborate your story as much as you can, as discreetly as possible. Remember, you don't know this for sure at this point, but you are certainly concerned and you're definitely starting to wonder. This isn't an off-the-cuff thing. You are seeing behavioral changes that for your wife is completely out of character. You need to start and prepare for war. You need to prepare yourself. You need to protect yourself and your children if you have them. You know, as a side note, it's infuriating that one even needs to make videos like this for another individual to listen to. Things are so heavily skewed. They are so heavily weighted against you as a man. It's unbelievable. Anyone that tells you that things are changing, I'm sorry, in my personal opinion, I think they're full of it. One night, my wife and I are alone, and it was fairly late. I made a move on her, and she shut me down cold. I asked her what the problem was, and she started crying and shaking. I asked her what the problem was, and received the shock of my life. My wife had told me she had been seeing the owner's son for about 6 months now. Their relationship had turned sexual, and she loved him. We were done, and that she was going to leave me and move in with him. She also told me that she had been deeply unhappy since the miscarriage and felt that something in our marriage had died. She needed a fresh start and needed to be free to take over and live her own life. She also told me that she loved this guy and he could make her happy. You know, I can't say I'm surprised. What probably happened was she wanted a third child because she was initially unhappy with the marriage to begin with. Because the third child didn't work out, she unfortunately had a miscarriage. And, you know, for whatever reason, like most women, they think having another kid is going to solve all their problems. Well, because the child didn't successfully happen, she went looking elsewhere for her validation and her need and a reason for being. You know, if this story was out anywhere else, they would be chastising the man for doing something wrong and not making her feel fulfilled or some BS excuse like that. Because remember, folks, it's always the fault of the man. It's never the woman's fault because she can never be accountable to her own actions. And that's where I'm going to stop things on the first part of this analysis here. Now that I'm looking at the different times, it can really be as long as 3, maybe pushing 4 videos, but I'm going to try to keep it at 2 here, just so you're not clicking off to another video. So I'll have this, the second part of this compiled and out soon here, maybe less than 12 hours, hopefully. This is going pretty well, it's going pretty smoothly, and it's, banging them out one after another isn't as difficult as I thought it would. So stay tuned and I'll have this other one out soon. Once again, as always, please like, share, and subscribe, and thank you for tuning in. Thank you much.